And so we're going to look at three small teacher moves, right? Where we're going to talk about opening up the tasks, using collaborative structures, and then leveraging student thinking to support connections, right? Um, so the first one, opening up the task, right? One of the my favorite ways, probably one that you are more than likely already leveraging, right? What do you notice and what do you wonder? It's a great way, right, to just that low floor, high ceiling, right? Low entry point, allowing everybody into the space, but we can really extend it in multiple ways. So, but it starts off with this, we're inviting student thinking, right? Where, hey, you click a number to give clamps to the octopus. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Right. So again, inviting that student thinking there. What's funny is whenever I did this, my wife was passing by and she's like, "What happens if you click the nine?" And I'm like, "Yes, all right." I even got my adult wife to be noticing and wondering here, right? But we start with student thinking, right? We invite it. And then once we invite it, right, we want to start developing that student thinking, right? So as the students are progressing through this activity, now we're asking them to break apart eight as many ways as they can, right? And as they're doing it, right, they're getting that feedback from the technology in a way that it's helping them organize and helping them develop and see different patterns, right? What patterns do you see? So you can kind of see the progression of this activity here. We could have started with this, what patterns do you see screen, which is a great screen, right? It can really, but thinking about those previous screens, right? And how we really starting to develop and sort of build that conceptual understanding, right? Really rooting it in students' previous experiences, if you will. So developing that student thinking, one way we can open up the task. Another way we can open up the task, because you know as well as I do, sometimes notice and wonders, they can go off the rails and we start noticing and wondering stuff that I didn't want them to notice and wonder, right? One of my other favorites is the problem posing, right? Where you can show them a numberless graph and asking them to, can you give me one challenging question that you could ask, or what's a simple question that you may ask, right? And so you allow students, right, to give them a little ownership and give them a chance for them to really look at the data and start interpreting and start thinking. You creating basically an item bank of questions. Second move, right? Once we've opened up the task, we want to think about, okay, how do I get my students to talk math, right? How do I get them to be discoursing, right? But in a productive manner. And so what I really love is, again, I mentioned a little bit building thinking classroom, but I love the visible thinking component of it, right? Of having the vertical whiteboards, having students working with just that one marker and then having them, bounce ideas off of each other. So really thinking about making that thinking visible, not just for an individual student, but for others in the group. But then also thinking about that purposeful feedback, right? What kind of feedback do I want to provide? When do I want to provide it? Who's providing that feedback, right? And that's the great thing about technology. It's another way that we can really leverage technology in a way to provide students, again, that purposeful feedback, a feedback that is, again, thinking with the students, not for the students, right? Which is it's a very clear distinction as to how we want to leverage technology in the classroom. Um, but then we can also provide them as they're working in these groups, right? We can always provide them with a little bit more structure and purpose, right? Because a lot of times, I know it's happened to me. You tell them to talk math and then they do anything but talk math, or you always have one person that's kind of taking the lead and you got some that don't, right? So it can be kind of chaotic, right? So you can always provide a little bit of structure and purpose, right? I love assigning like sentence stems. Sentence stems are great as well from a language development standpoint as well, but really structuring them, helping them learn how to communicate with each other academically, right? So having those there for them, that's a great way to provide a little bit more structure. You can also assign roles, right? And these are just various roles that you can assign to different members in the group. One of my favorites here is the spy. So if you actually have them on vertical whiteboards, you designate a spy. So that spy actually goes to other whiteboards and see if there's something that they can take back to their home group there. So again, just another way you can provide them a little bit of structure and purpose. And then finally, as we talk about leveraging student thinking, one of my favorite books out there is Dr. Rachel Lambert talking about rethinking disability in mathematics. And she really talks about that the magic is in the margins, right? When we are designing our lessons, we don't design it retrospectively for our marginalized students, right? we design it with them in mind, right? The magic is in our margins, in our marginalized students. Like, where's the math too narrow, right? How can I provide more access for all of my students, right? And then how can I provide more support for them? And so she takes this universal design for math, this design elements of providing students with multiple opportunities to engage, to represent, to show their thinking. So that's a great way to really start leveraging and opening up access to all of your students. But then once we open up access, right, once we are getting students to draw, to sketch, to show us patterns, whatever it may be. What do we do with that thinking, right? How can I, again, elicit the important math? The five practices, right? The five practices are a great way to do that, right? Because I can now start anticipating specific students' responses. And now, as students are engaged in the task itself, now I'm monitoring. Now it's a chance for me to start selecting student work here. Again, because I've already anticipated, right? I've put in that thought beforehand, and now I'm just selecting and I'm going to sequence them in a way to now ask students, right? How are these strategies the same? How are they different? But again, it's not something that I provided, right? It's my students, their work,